Hello, welcome everybody to our first meetup event in 2023. It's been a while. The last one was in November, so happy to see you all back after our summer break. Was a bit with some turmoils in some parts of New Zealand. But happy to see you all here and welcome Clarke Ching. I can't believe that the last time you were here was actually in July. And you showed us, yeah, it was July. And I was like, I looked it up today and I was like, it feels like it was at the end of last year, but it was actually in July. And really well perceived talk about the flagship bottleneck. And people, because they liked it so much, we agreed during that talk that he would do something about multitasking. And so the topic that came out of that is actually sync and swim was your preferred title?
Sync and swim. They've changed my name, the title since then.
Don't dilute delivery. Yeah. Well, I'm an accredited Kanban trainer in New Zealand. So for all of you who are interested in Kanban University training, that's me. Everybody knows Clarke Ching, I think. Some really cool books. The Bottleneck Rules is my personal favorite, but then there is hang on. Help me, Clarke.
Rolling
roll down the hill.
Rolling. Actually, there was an earlier version that was a Star Wars thing. It was called Rolling Ewoks Downhill, but they wouldn't let me sell that.
Yeah, and you've written a few books since.
Yeah,
you can show them. Right? But first of all, just over to Dan, who's actually my fellow trainer in Australia, and he's got the Melbourne and Sydney meetup events, and you've got a great announcement today as well.
Yeah, so this early announcement. So this later on this year on October the 9th, save the date, folks, October the 9th, we're going to be running the first Kanban conference here in Australia. We haven't done one yet, and so I'm putting together the conference here in Australia. It's just one day, for the first year, and we'll see how it goes. And hopefully, if it's successful, we'll come back again and do 2 days next year. So yeah, if you do want to come over it'll be in Melbourne, Australia on October the 9th. It'll be great to see folks there, and we'll have a whole bunch of speakers talking about all things Kanban. So yeah, do come along.
Yay. A first on our side of the world. And over to you, Clarke. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Now, I'm torn. I'm going to, hang on, if I can find, the share button's gone. Uh-oh. Hang on, they've moved the share button. Here we go. Okay.
Same thing for me with the recording before.
Oh, it's too much. Now, can I, here we go. Just got to make sure that I trust that. And I think you might, oh no, you don't get to see my code. I don't know what's going on there, but that picture looked a lot nicer. Okay, that looks a bit better. I'm not sure. That picture looks nicer normally. Don't worry, it's probably symbolic of something. Now, I'm just going to change the size of this here. So I'm sharing my iPad screen, and I'm just trying to get rid of stuff just in case I need to draw on it. I don't think I will, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so it's lovely to see you all, and yeah, I hope everything's all right for everyone who normally join that's in the North Island, because it's been a bit of a rough time up there. Apologies here, I had moved everything so it'll be good. Okay, right, I think I'm ready to go. Let's see. So I called this sync or swim because I was doing I thought I was playing with words and being very clever, and I just thought, oh, and Silke asked me for give me a graphic, and I go, so I came up with a sync or swim, and I changed the sync from SYNK to SYNKC, and then I should have changed it to and swim, because if you sync as in synchronization, then you're going to be much better at swimming, and if you don't, you're probably going to drown. It's not a very good analogy. I wish I hadn't done it. So I've just got a different title there and a picture of a vehicle that's broken down. Forget about all that. The title is irrelevant. I'm going to have 3 bits that I talk about here, but they're all related to the Thrive model, which is in the AgileToC method, the ATM, which is it's my addition of TOC and behavioral science on top of Agile. And if you look at the bit that we're gonna discuss today, it's just going to be some examples of synchronize the system. Now, I'm not going to run through all of this in detail, but just note at the middle of it, one of the things is about money. See in the heart, see in the middle of the heart there's snowballing profits. The productive buzz and the collective karma are about creating a really nice, safe, productive work environment where everyone feels like they're thriving or flourishing. And one thing's about money, but I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about money today because without it, businesses go broke. Right. Now, I'm going to move that there and that there so that when I look at things, I'm actually looking nearer the camera. Right. So, synchronize the system. Actually, I'm not going to talk more about that. I'm just going to go straight into it. And yeah, we'll start with this one. So this is actually, you know, when you put something together and you go, oh, I haven't got enough examples, I can't remember anything. And then all of a sudden your iPad stops working. Okay, I seem to be working again now. Apologies, I'm going to stop sharing my iPad and I'm going to share my keynote because something's going funny with that. And it's not making me happy. So you'll get to see it all again from the very beginning, provided I click the share button, but very quickly. Sorry about that. It normally works well.
We're still quite lucky because I think there are still parts of the country who are actually without power. So these folks probably can't actually even join today. That's
true. Everything is relative, isn't it? Right. Now, can I check? Can you now see a nicer looking version of that first screen?
It's a presenter view. So we see the slides on the left.
Okay. So I need to stop sharing again. And I need to share the keynote. That should be better now, I think.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll start it again. Okay, sorry, everything threw me there. Start again, pretend. Okay, we're back. All right. Okay, so don't dilute Agile or don't dilute delivery. We're talking about the Thrive model and we're talking about the synchronizing of the whole system. And I'm specifically going to talk about multitasking at the end of it. I've got a very interesting and counterintuitive example that's really obvious when you see it, but then every time you go back and look at it again, you scratch your head and go, oh, that can't be true, but it makes so much sense. So it's one of those things that's both obvious and non-obvious at the same time. But before that, I've got two examples that I want to show you. And I'm hoping you'll think that they're just really, really obvious, but they weren't to the people at the time. So there's this weird thing about all of the stuff that we tend to do. It's counterintuitive because otherwise everyone would already be doing it. So the first one I'm going to talk about here. This is the siloing, synchronizing, and synergizing. So this was just last week. One of my clients, I was talking to him, and he was just telling me about how he's got two teams and he's just sort of stepped in to manage one of the teams temporarily, and the other team he'd been looking after it for a while. And he went and looked at this other team and he realized then that there was a problem that both of these teams had that they'd never talked about, which is that they weren't talking. They actually weren't really communicating. Well, they were a tiny bit. They were kind of chatting every so often, but Team A and Team B were both deliverers and customers of each other. So Team A would sometimes do some stuff that needed Team B to do stuff. So they kind of schedule it in. And then when it was done and finished and, when they were ready for it, they say, hey, have you done that stuff? And then Team B would go, oh, that's right. Too busy at the moment, can't have it. So there was kind of a lot of stuff that was getting stuck in limbo where the teams were just waiting for each other because they weren't chatting. So this is really obvious, right? They were working as two silos, even though they weren't really silos. And I bet you can think loads and loads and loads of things that you could do with this, these teams to fix it, because it's kind of a really obvious fix. He just said, oh, I said, what did you do? He said, oh, I just set up a few short regular catch-ups for them so they can talk to each other. That's really obvious, right? It's really obvious. They're not chatting, but they're chatting. But here's the thing. They had been working with each other, these teams, and known each other for years, 5 to 10 years. They've been working together. And maybe at one stage they chatted with each other, but conversations and stuff for a lot of people who would rather silo naturally, sometimes if they're not adding much, sometimes they just sort of slowly fritter away and just stop happening. And that's what happened here. And it was actually having a lot of knock-on effects for them. I'm going to come back to the knock-on effects in just a moment, but I want to just make a distinction here between siloing and synchronizing. So, and these are things that I hope you like my animations here. This is a big fancy looking grid, but all it's saying is that you silo and you synchronize, and you can do that as individuals. So I'm sure you've all had jobs where you sit down, like today, for instance, I sat down, didn't have to talk to anyone until I spoke to Silky at 5:45. And I had this lovely day where I just siloed and I synchronized in my own head. It was lovely. I didn't have to talk to anyone, just joyous. That's at the individual level. At the team level, that's one of the things, that the stuff that people like us do. We come in and we add synchronization. And then at the teams level, we got lots of teams, they can silo, but they also need to synchronize. So again, up to organizations, and then the individual organizations, it's not uncommon for the marketing department to silo themselves away from the product department and think each other's evil and not talk to each other. It's also not uncommon for them to actually chat to each other and synchronize well. And then, of course, you've got, at an even higher level, you've got synchronization across organizations, and also siloing. Now, I don't want to make a big point of the grid. I just drew it and I wanted to explain it because I didn't want to delete it. What I want to show you is right in the middle here. What this guy did, his name was Aaron, when he said, I got them talking together, he basically moved them from siloing, separate little dots, where they were probably synchronizing very well inside the dots, and he just added a little dotted line between them, and they got it thicker and thicker just by adding a few little chats. So he moved from siloing to synchronizing. And now, very interesting point about synchronization is that it doesn't come for free. It doesn't happen by itself. There's like this natural thing that people and teams tend to kind of be either individualistic or tribal, and they split apart and they silo far more naturally than they do get together. It's just a more natural way, especially in our industry, when we've got a fair share of introverts. We don't like picking up the phone and talking to each other. I've got teenage daughters, and you say, oh, look, could you ring your grandma and say that we're coming around? And they go, oh, I don't want to talk on the phone. So there's this thing that synchronization doesn't happen unless we actually make it happen. And then even then, when we do make it happen, quite often things can just drift apart and we go back to siloing. There's kind of an entropy if we're not careful. So that doesn't come for free. Now, Aaron, the guy I was talking to, he said, I've set up these calls and we're just going to chat. We've had a few of them and it seems to be doing some really good stuff. It's getting better. Okay, cool. And we talked about it and I said, what comes next? And he go, oh, I'll just keep the calls going. And then I suggested to him that there was a next step, which is synergizing, which is when these two teams will get together, they'll have a bit of a natter, and then suddenly their two brains of the, say, the tech leads will bounce off each other and they'll come up with what we call a bloody good idea. And they'll do something that's clever and better, and they will synergize. So synergize, if you don't know, I'm sure most of you do. I remember when I first heard about it, someone says synergizing is when someone's got one and someone else has got another one, and you put them together and you have three. So there's this lovely thing that happens when you get people chatting to each other and synchronizing, is that if someone makes it happen, they can actually then synergize and get far, far, far more value than just the mechanistic synchronizing and so on. So now, if you think of the synchronization stuff, I'm sure you've all seen the synchronized swimmers in the swimming pools and the Olympics and stuff. And it's very clockwork stuff. They've got a routine. They practiced it. It's very, very clockwork. It follows a rhythm. And that's the thing about synchronizing. It's getting all the cogs working together. It's the mechanistic coordination, clockwork kind of view of things. And we all tend to be really good at that. Not everyone is, but we tend to be really good at that. And a lot of our solutions come from putting in synchronization mechanisms or getting people in roles where they're synchronized. But there's this third level over and above that, which is when they start talking together, that they can actually start being clever, synergizing. And so if you're familiar with the theory of constraint stuff, you may have heard of, actually, can I check? Who's heard of drum buffer rope? That's the theory of constraints kind of, okay, so that's kind of like fundamental. Nowadays, although it was never actually named as such in the goal.
This meeting is being recorded.
That's the fundamental. It's drum buffer rope, and so when we're putting that in, it's a synchronization mechanism. Goldratt started out. He designed that as a very, very secret algorithm that he sold to big companies in the 70s and early 80s that did manufacturing synchronization. It's scheduled very cleverly with a bottleneck. And it was just a set up a drum beat. So I'd like to contrast that though with the heartbeat, which is the kind of the stuff when we get the heartbeat, the human bit coming into it. And I think a lot of the times we tend to, in the agile world, which I include as Kanban, you guys might not, we tend to favor one or the other, and like you'll even see in the Agile Manifesto, processes over people. The processes tends to be the mechanistic bit, but the people bit seems to be all the other stuff. I don't think you can have the two, but when you look at teams, when people are working together, this drumbeat, this synchronization actually gets people talking together, and it gives you the chance to synchronize and synergize. I don't think you can get to synergize without actually talking to each other. So there's kind of like there's a step thing there. Now that might sound all really obvious. I hope it sounds obvious, but it only occurred to me last week that there's actually these distinct stages. And I really want to point out that the synchronization stuff doesn't happen. It doesn't come for free unless we make it. Okay, so Aaron, in this case, has come in and said, right, we're going to do this. And he's made it happen. And if he hadn't, that team would have gone on for years and years and years talking about all of the things that frustrated them. So we got the drumbeat versus the heartbeat. So back to our little diagram here. So he set up a few chats, really easy for him to do, really difficult for other people to do. And now I just want to just compare the before and after. And I'll describe it quickly. Ideally, if we were going slow, I'll get you to type in things and stuff. But just imagine what it was like if you were sitting in Team B, and every so often you get a really angry phone call from the team leader of Team A who says, "Hey, I was expecting this from you guys, and you haven't done it yet." And the Team B goes, "Oh no, it's them again. We hate them." Even though they go to the pub and drink with them in the evening, and they go, "Oh, you should have rung us up last week and we forgot it, and we're busy now." And so the trust level and the whole collaboration level and the relationship was kind of sucked, and they were always having all of these delays that caused work in progress to grow, because Team A was waiting on this one little piece that needed to plug in before their 3 months worth of work could be finished, and they're told by Team B, "Oh, you have to wait three more weeks until we can get to that." So little tiny effort, adding a little bit more synchronization, turn that uglyish before picture into a nice one where they started rebuilding trust, started chatting to each other, very, very lightweight. It takes them 15 minutes to half an hour a week to have a chat. They're kind of like a long range, short range, kind of just a heads up of what's coming up on their radar in the new few weeks. And over time, they'll grow to like each other, and they'll start having these little clever ideas will start bursting as they grow to trust each other, and they start collaboratively problem solving. So there's a lot of words there I've just said, but let me point this out. Tiny synchronization change can actually have a huge effect, positive effect, not just on how much work they get, productivity, but also on the culture and the nature of the relationship. Okay, so that's really, really, really important there. Little change, big effect. And I'm sure you will love that stuff. It's it's the core idea of the theory of constraints is that we figure out where to focus, and then we leverage and make a small change just at the right point. Okay, right. We'll move on now, I believe. That's just the first example. And that just happened last week. I wanted to chuck it in because it's so simple and obvious to us, but it's not to others. And so is this one. This here is where I worked 10 years ago, or maybe longer. 11 years ago, I started working in this place. And it was in Scotland. So the sky, I think, was actually, this was actually genuinely blue. It was probably, I took a picture including the sky because the sky was blue, which was very rare there. And there's the front gate. And I tried to hide that it was General Electric, but all I did is, if you look at the front where the windows have got that little blue square, is make it look like there's a smiley face on the windows. But that's actually General Electric. It was a site that I worked with in Scotland about a dozen years ago. Now, when I came in, they had just converted to a kind of, it wasn't waterfall, it was just it was about 100 developers roughly, and it was just that they had just launched the latest release of their project, and it was kind of like old Windows releases. It would have been about 3 years, and it was riddled with bugs, and they put this stuff out and they were in a mess, and they got into that. They thought, oh, we'll save ourselves here, things are just so kind of terrible, we don't release often, our customers hate our things because it's so riddled with bugs. We'll convert to Agile. So they put everyone on a 2-day Scrum course, everyone, and then they suddenly were Agile. And then they had to hire someone to come and kind of rescue them from that. And so I came in, and they kind of had a bit of stuff going on there in Agile, and things had sort of settled down a little bit. And I came in, and you know, there's fundamental kind of little bits that you do with Agile, and it was like a little bit of a hybrid of everything. They called it, after I've been there a wee while, they called it Clarke Band, because it was a mixture of, you know, there was some Scrum stuff. There was just, you know, at that stage, we just did what we had to. We didn't really follow a framework because we were more or less making it up at the same as we went along. And I went in with the fundamentals of theory of constraints in my head, matched up with Agile. So this is one of the ones that it'll be really, really obvious as you read through this, and you'll go, it's this. And when you get the name, I won't play games with chats. I'll tell you what it is in a moment. Okay, so just imagine you're in there, and you've been there for a bit, and you just notice there's this recurring thing that there's a lot of really grumpy developers there. And then I started asking questions, going, why are these developers all grumpy? And why are the project managers all grumpy? And why are their customers out there all grumpy? Why is everyone so freaking grumpy all the time? And this was one of the causes of the grumpiness. Again, made up fiction. It kind of went like this. On Monday, there'd be a developer A, sitting there, as you can see on the screen. He'd be busy, or he or she would be busy working on customer one's work. And then there's this little ding, and a little message thing would pop up and go, are you there? And it'd be from a project manager. And the developer will go, yep. What are you working on? And the dev would say, customer one's work. All right, knowing exactly where this conversation is going on. Great, says the project manager. When will it be finished? He's got that kind of like kid in the back of the car thing. Are you there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And he says, oh, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 days. Okay, I'm sure you've been through all this before, and you've possibly been in both roles as well. But it gets kind of worse because the PM then says, okay, I need you to switch to customer 2's project immediately. They're hassling me and they threaten to call the CEO. It's really urgent. And the dev says, are you sure? It'll take me at least a half a day, probably a day, to switch out what I'm working on so that I can come back to it later. Now, I presume you all understand that stuff. He's going to take the stuff he's halfway through, take it, put it somewhere. I'm so far away from code and actually Teams these days. I don't know what you have to do, but he took it away, wrote up notes and stuff so he could come back to it later. And they reckoned it took them generally maybe three or 4 hours. Sometimes a bit more of it was particularly messy. Okay, but and he go, oh, it'll take me that time. And the PM says, of course, I'm sure. I wouldn't have asked otherwise, would I? And so the dev says, okay, and just goes, okay, I've done this before, does that, puts it to a side. And then half a day or so later, he or she is working on customer 2's work. Right. Okay, so probably really familiar. And now the concept you're thinking here, you go, oh, waste through switching cost. We all know that. Nothing new here, right? We know that there's the context switching, but in this case is literally moving things around. There's a lot of work to switch cost. So right there, and things are going well with developer A until Wednesday comes along, and then suddenly, bing, and I'll just make her a she. She looks down and she goes, oh, it's the PM again. Are you there? Yep. What are you working on? Customer 2's work. Great. When will it be finished? Oh, I don't know, maybe another couple of days. Okay, but I really, really, really urgently need you to switch to customer 3's work. Okay, so again, you're all familiar with this because it's happening every few days or at least once a week. And the dev says, but and then just gives up, shrugs, there's no point protesting, and takes everything, switches it away, and then starts on customer 3's work. Task switching. Jerry Weinberg, many years ago, I think, introduced this as a big concept. I can't remember which of his books it was, but he introduced this idea, and he kind of had a number that it costs 25% of your time. No, he came up with big numbers. I think he came up with them off the top of his head, and they were quoted many times. But you'll see loads of stuff about context switching nowadays with our extra busy lifestyle as we're busy, being interrupted all the time. But this stuff here was really painful because it just kept happening over and over again. So the PM on Friday says, I need you to switch to customer 1's project. It's urgent. The developer objects, but then switches to customer 1's work. And of course, that involves getting the customer 1's work that they'd previously put away and brought back. So you're all familiar with this. But here's the weird thing. This has been, like with the earlier example with the 2 dots, the 2 teams, this had been going on for years and years and years. This was their standard operating mode. And we all look at this from the outside with fresh eyes and go, holy crap, that's stupid. And they all look at it go, oh, this is just how it is. This is we're actually serving our customers. We're very responsive to all of their urgent needs, and they couldn't untangle it. So I've cut away here to a lovely picture of a lady somewhere in the world that I got from unsplash.com, who's untangling a crab, I think it is, from a fishing line. I don't know if you've ever done anything like that, but it would take her 3 minutes to do what would take us half an hour. And at the end of it, we wouldn't have any crab left. And we'd probably have a cut up net. But untangling, I think, is one of the things that is a real skill that people like us have learned because we've learned the patterns. Just like this lady here is able to untangle and take this crab out because she's done it so many times. We've seen the patterns over and over and over. So I just want to show you how I untangled this one here, and it involved using a theory constraints current reality tree. And if you've seen this, if you haven't seen it before, it's from his book. I don't have a copy of it here. it's not luck. And it's one of the most amazing tools because it allows you to get all of the things that are going on and then just put them in here and draw cause and effect arrows between them. And so what it does is it untangles all of the cause and effect. And at the top of this diagram, you have all of the big things. In the middle, you kind of have all of the middle things. And then down the bottom, you tend to have a root cause. It's kind of like if you can use the 5 whys thing really quickly, why, and make a lot of progress. This here takes a bit longer. It's a bit more work because you're really trying to understand the cause and effect mechanisms that are at play. So now I'm sure you could all see what was happening in GE's site, but I got 2 of their senior developers, Lisa and Karen. They're two of their most senior people, and we sat down, and it took us probably, I would say, 6 to 8 hours to come up with what you see there. And that's because we had to untangle a whole lot of stuff that was in their heads and get this cause and effect logic out in front of us. And now I'm not going to run through the details of this, but it was really helpful to do this because suddenly it was like their lights turned on in their eyes and they could see what was happening and they could see why it was destructive. And they could also see how obvious it was to actually fix it. And I'm just going to highlight that little fellow there. Domain experts, I'll make it a bit larger so you can read it. Domain experts lose up to 2 days each week due to interruptions. So below that in the diagram, if I just go back, there's a whole lot of stuff that's showing that. And then above it in the diagram, there's the consequences, the effect of that thing happening. Again, I won't delve into the details because I haven't actually looked at the details for 12 years and it could be rubbish. I don't know. But that's what we got to. Suddenly they go, whoa, we're probably losing it a couple of days a week for every developer, or at least every senior developer there per week, a couple of days a week. That's a 40% wasted productivity. That's pretty devastating. And when we ran it around and we were just looking at it and they go, no, it could be more than that. But no one would believe us if we said it was more. It could well be less than that, but it's sort of between 1 and 2 days. So roughly 20, 30, 40% productivity lost just with all the switching in and switching out that was going on. And it wasn't happening to the more junior developers. It was happening to the most senior ones. That's a devastating loss of productivity there. So, okay, now the solution is just a little bit more synchronization. Now, I wish you could have seen working with these Lisa and Karen. The solution, once they got there, it was like, oh, this is, how do we fix it? And I'm sure you've got ideas. And in fact, does anyone feel like typing in a suggestion, just to get a couple of suggestions here? What might you do? And remember, there's actually probably a zillion things that you could do. And then I'll tell you kind of what we did. Just a couple of thoughts. I don't think there'll be any surprises here because to people like us, this is obvious. Unless there's no chats come through, in which case it's not. No switching. If there's 2, oh, that's actually, I like that, Ravi. Yeah. No switching if there's 2 days. Hang on, I need to widen that there. 2 days or less to finish. Yeah, what a good idea. Isn't that really obvious? Prioritization. Yes. Yeah. Again, I know it's a really good idea. And it's just really obvious to people like us. It wasn't to them. Okay. Now I'll just wait. If anything else comes up, I'll read it. But just those 2 ideas alone are basically the crux of it. Now you whip. So the whole thing is about whip, late commits. It's all of this. It's just so obvious. Some kind of value ranking to elevate sequencing as management opportunity. I must say, Craig, there's a lot of big words in there, but I've untangled it, and I know exactly what you mean. You were dead right. Yeah. So
it makes sense.
Beautifully, yeah. It all makes sense. Right. Okay. So I'll come back to this now. But so I'm hoping you can see the thing because I'm repeating it over and over. What's obvious to us is what's so intuitive and obvious to us is crazy stuff because they've been doing to everyone else because they've been doing this stuff for years and they just wouldn't think of it. but it is a little bit more synchronization, like those three things. Here's my version of what they did. They put in a choking mechanism, which limits whip, it limits starting stuff in particular, and then just get people focusing on finishing stuff. I especially like the one, the no switching of their 2 days or less. We hadn't got that far, but just putting this stuff in here, it'll just allow them. And you know what? Because we were doing Agile, effectively, they had already switched across to Agile. It just involved us revving up that a little bit and just being a little bit more specific and making sure the product owner and Scrum did what they were meant to do. And if I were to abstract that away now, and I'll just give you a new word that you'll feel really clever and you can quote it to other people. It's from the Bottleneck Rules. You know, the idea of there's a bottleneck. What they did is they put in a throttle neck. How about that, eh? A throttle neck. They put in a throttle. It's a combination of the requirement to choke stuff being released in and someone who actually makes sure that happens. So it's not just a policy, it's actually someone else, a role, a throttle neck, and they actually literally, they choke so they only let enough food go in. I actually, no, I won't tell you that. I'll move on. Otherwise, if I tell you interesting side things, we'll be here forever. And I wouldn't inflict me upon you for too long. Okay, so that's what they did, right? Really freaking obvious stuff. But can I just point it out again? It wasn't a lot of synchronization. It was just a little bit of synchronization. And then something funny happened once they got this, is that they effectively just started turning around everything just so much more quickly. Everyone just loved it. It was just so easy. It took away all the stress. So now, can you look here? We go, this is a synchronization solution. And I'll cover them. No, I don't cover the money. Yeah, I do cover the money stuff in a moment. But can you just imagine how uncalm things were and how angry things were? Oh, it's that frickin' project manager back at me again. Now I've got it. And then the project manager on the other side go, oh, those developers, they're so frickin' stuck in their ways and they're unhelpful. And I've got so putting this stuff in a little bit more synchronization, a very focused, simple change that was easy to implement, easy to enforce, and could stick around, changed the culture in that place. It changed the culture because it took away all of the arguments and misery. And it also meant that their productivity shot up. Okay, because we don't just want productivity. We want to make a nice working place, remember? Okay, so now this stuff is obvious to us, but we had to make a little bit of a sales job, except because I'm a coward and I've adopted the style of working whereby I'm Yoda to Luke's, and Yoda sits in the swamp and says wise things, and Luke goes off and fights battles and sometimes dies. Lisa and Karen had to do the sales job on this to get people to buy into it. So we just really just put some numbers together. And what we did is we assumed that only 1 day a week was being wasted, and just try to come up with what's that actually costing the organization. And it was so that was a 20% waste rather than they thought it was maybe 2 days a week, which was 40%. Okay, so just 1 day a week. And we kind of ramped that down from what we thought it was, because it just didn't sound plausible to say there was a 40% loss. No one could live with that, saying that for the last 10 years, we have been working at 60% capacity because of some silliness that we could have easily fixed. So we ramped it down a little bit. And this is a really useful point here. And I actually got this from Ellie Goldratt. If you read the goal, he told me, I asked him about this once. I said, I'm pretty sure that the numbers here in the goal, the numbers that you got at the end, they were way too low. I think he put something like 17% increase in profit. And I can't remember the number. And he goes, oh, it wasn't 7, it was doubling, tripling, quadrupling, or whatever. It was just so much more than that. But if I put that in a book and said, you're going to do this much and make this much more money, no one would have believed it, even though that was based on truth. So this is just one of those little things. We're actually, because we're targeting here something that's actually really, really, really valuable, it is going to give you a disproportionate bang for your buck, but it's best to investigate things like that afterwards rather than make promises up front, because you just come across as naive and starry-eyed. Okay, so we did that. We go, okay, only 1 day a week, even though we think it's 2. And then we just thought, well, if we eliminated the wasted day and got rid of that stuff there, then the value-added days would go up from 4 days a week to 5 days a week, which was effectively from 4 days to 5. That's a 25% increase in capacity. And then we just thought, well, with 100 developers, and that's like hiring another 25 developers for free. Can I just get some nods if you're there? Does that logic follow through? Yep. Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you. Just a little bit, a little tiny change is like giving them 25 developers for free. Aha. But we didn't stop there, because that would be a naive trap. Because those 25 developers that we get for free, without having to hire any more desks or buy any new PCs, because it's just a little focused synchronization change, it's actually worth much more than that. And I want to point out, this is another theory of constraints thing, because there's 2 ways of looking at it. And Goldratt called this the cost world and versus the throughput world. And I'll just explain it here. It's kind of obvious. Goldratt, thought leadery kind of book writery persons, we kind of make up names for things, like throttlenecks and stuff like that. It keeps us amused, and it makes people think that we've invented something new. So the first way is to have a cost focus, and you go, "Whoa, brilliant, guys! We've put in this change here that's the equivalent productivity-wise of getting 25 extra developers, which is extraordinary. And let's say they earn 50K a year. That'd be really cool. So that's like, if you do your maths, and I got Siri to do this for me, so I hope it's correct, that's like an extra 1.25 million pounds worth of developers for free a year. Or, $2.5 million roughly. Yeah, wow, that's really, really good. Now, a lot of people would have liked that, because GE then and now did a whole lot of stuff with funny money to justify a lot of the Six Sigma projects. And they would take something like that and pretend it was real money, but it really wasn't real money. The real money is, that's just a ballpark figure that's useful to think about. The real money is in what they actually would do with those extra 25 developers. And I wish I could tell you what it was worth. But what I will tell you here is I reckon that change was worth between 20 and 50 million a year. And the way I came up with that number is I knew they had a whole lot of customers that were waiting for work. There was a whole lot of work that they could do, and it was all billable. And I only ever got, I accidentally made a sale for 20 million pounds when I was there, and I'm kind of I just told some people that were customers some stuff that made them decide to make the sale, and I didn't mean to make the sale because I wasn't in the sales thing, but it was 20 million. So that was one customer worth 20 million, and so I'm reckoning here that in this case that this change was worth maybe 20 to 50 million. Who knows? It could have been 10 to 100. Who knows? But it's a lot more money than if you just look at the cost, because remember here in the business, our job isn't to save money. That's maybe part of it. We don't want to be silly with money, but we're not in the job of saving money. We're in the job of making money. So being able to do more work and sell more was like free cash and profits and so on, and that was worth so much more to them. Just because, I'm going to repeat it again, a little tiny synchronization change. And it caused the product owner about 3 weeks worth of grief as they put this in place, because he didn't want to do the job. But when he did, everything calmed down. The culture changed very, very quickly. No one would have gone back to the old days, and it was all good. Right. So that's one example here, but it's not the full thing. It's not the full thing, because if you focused on that example, it's really good. This is the good stuff that I'm really just trying to get to here, which is the multitasking stuff. Now, I'm just going to get here and just see. I'm going to paste in. So I'm trying to find a little app that's got a weird icon. It told me it started it. I can't see it. Sorry. I'll come back to it. There's an article I wrote about, I think it was maybe about 15 years ago, and it runs through this little example. I don't want to do it now. I'll just explain it. But it's a really good example to get to do live, and you've seen variations on it. And I think they're mostly the stuff that's in the Agile community is nicked from my original article and then reworked. But then I nicked my version from TOC people. So it's nothing, nothing untoward about it. It's just this really simple idea. Imagine that you've got 3 projects here, project 1, project 2, and project 3. And there's 2 ways of executing them. The one that's below in the bottom bit there is to do it in the obvious way. You go, or do project 1, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then 1, 2, 3, and then I, and then I, then I, etc. Right? And then the other one is to switch between the projects, and there's a switching cost. Just imagine it yourself when you get down to H, and so we go H, and then you go, okay, and then it goes to 8. And then you go, oh crap, what's 8 in Roman numerals? It's VIII. The example here, and I will paste in the thing later, but it's a sorry, I'm just noticing we did nick it from you. Cool. I'm not sure who's written that. So we got those 2 different modes there. If you run through the thing later on, it's a really good way to experience the switching cost in your head of running the projects in 2 different ways. But I want to skip over it, and I want to show you something with numbers on it now. And because the switching cost that we focused on in the previous piece is only a tiny part of the story. So let's take those 3 projects here. I'm going to add some color to them, and I'm going to say that each task there in that project, each task there takes 2 weeks, and that we have 3 types of specialist resource. There's a blue and a yellow and a green, and the blues do the ABCs, the yellows special in the middle 4 tasks, and then the green do the last 3. You'll see as I animate it. Now, I stole this example from a paper by a company called ProChain, which in maybe 15, 20 years ago, put out a whole lot of really interesting articles on critical chain, which is Goldrat's project management thing, and it came from a guy called Richard Zoltner. So I've stole his, but I've added something onto the end of it, which makes it even better. So if we took these projects, right, and we've got project 1, 2, 3, and they're identical. The blue ones do the first 3, the yellow ones do the second 3, and then the green ones do the next 3. Now, let's also assume that each project here has its own project manager. And let's say that we're actually chasing with these projects, even though they look identical, real business benefits. And project 1 is a new product, which will give them 10K per week once live. Yay. Project 2 will save them, this is how old this is, $8,000 per week on postage. And project 3 fixes a known defect, which is currently live and is worth $5,000 a week, and saved something or others once it goes live. So 10, 8, and 5. So if you're going to do them in any particular order, obviously you do project 1 first, and then project 2, and then project 3, right? Or ideally you'd have enough staff to do all 3 at once and get all the benefits. So these are the benefits of finishing, and they're kind of like a shortcut version of the cost of delay. And of course, everything I say here is made up, and you can make up entirely different numbers, but reach the same conclusions. So let's run through the ideal scenario, which is where we have no shared resources, right? This is the fantasy one that so many projects are actually based on, this kind of unreal belief, and they all would finish in 20 weeks, right? And then they'd all start making their respective money, 10K, 8K, and 5K a week after they go live, which would be brilliant. Oh, wouldn't that be lovely? But we don't have loads of resources, and we have to share the resources across the projects. And so let's just say, like in the original thing, we have one of each type of this resource, and we still have 3 project managers, and they each want their projects to start immediately and keep moving, and they're still going to be going, hey, are you there? How much longer you got? You know, are we there yet? Conversations. But we also have a commercial manager, what I would now call a throttle neck, but back then I referred to as a flow master, who prioritize the projects to maximize cash flow. In other words, we put someone in charge of making money, right? Now, if we've got shared resources, as I've just described, and we're single tasking, this is the good version. I'm going to show you the bad version in a minute. We start off like this. We start off and blue works on project 1, task A, right? And then B, and then C, and then they switch across to project 2, and yellow can start on project 1. Okay, so there's nothing surprising. So just watch this as it just folds out exactly as you'd expect. Project 3's now started, and project 1 is just about to finish, and project 2's partway through, and we go on like this. There we go, lovely. There we go. Really obvious. So this is single tasking. It's the opposite of the evil multitasking. Notice the cash flow here looks like that. And then I'm going to compare the cash flow with the next scenario, which is where everyone dilutes their effort and multitasks. So this is real world bad multitasking. So we're going to take away the flow master, the throttle neck, right? And we're going to say, oh, guys, just you guys work it out keep everyone busy. And just be fair about it. Don't anyone hold the resources, guys. Okay, right. Fairness is it's one of our cultural values, right? So we're going to do that. Everyone fair. So we've still got one of each type of resource, exactly as before. We've got 3. They all want to start. 3 project managers. They all want to start at the same time, but we've taken away the flow master, who's going to enforce them to make good commercial decisions. Silky, there's a man wandering around behind you in your kitchen. I hope you know that.
I'm sorry. Yes. That's Brian. That's my Airbnb guest. Sorry. He's just come home from a horrible day, and I think he's been to the Papa Museum.
Very nice. It's always good there. Cool. Sorry, I had to comment. Right. So okay. So now we had the ideal, and now we've got the bad example, which is what everyone does, right? So we've got project 1. We start here, and blue starts on project 1. But what happens? Project manager 2 says, blue. And my customer really wants to know how things are getting on. Can you switch across, do some work? And the blue person says, of course, I've been on this a week, I'll switch across. And then same with project 3, and then back up to project 1, project 2, project 3. Of course, remember this is, for the sake of teaching, it's very contrived. And then and the real world is probably worse than this. And then we switch across. We've got now, oh, look, did you see the project? One's actually yellow's working on that. And now we keep the same thing going. This is looking really good. Oh, look. There we go. This project, all of these ones, all of the customers are happy because they know there's progress happening on each of them. And everyone's just delighted. And if you look, look, they've got the cash flow there, right? Now, I'm going to compare these 3. I'll start there. Remember, project 1 was the most important, and in the no multitasking one, which is the bottom one, it took 20 weeks. In the multitasking version, it took 48. Because if you remember the subtitle of this was Don't Dilute Delivery, because the multitasking dilutes the delivery and it causes lots of delays. Simon has to switch to something else. That's ironic. Cheers. Right. Okay. So there we go. But notice that project 1 finished 28 weeks sooner, and cash flow starts, therefore, once it's released, it starts flowing 28 weeks sooner. And because it made 10K a week, once it went live, the multitasking cost this imaginary company $280,000. Comparing the 2 scenarios. Now look at 2. Now notice that in the multitasking scenario, it started sooner, So that kept a lot of people happy. No customers were being told by any project managers, oh, we haven't started your project yet. They were all saying, yeah, we've started. But in the no multitasking version, they started later, but they finished earlier by 22 weeks. And the cash flow obviously started coming in. And at 8K a week, an extra 22 weeks is 176 imaginary dollars that was lost in the multitasking world. And then project 3, you see, it also started quite a lot later, but it also finished a lot earlier. And at only 5K a week, that was 80K that was lost due to multitasking. Okay, so just notice all of them there. They all took a lot less time. Every single one of them. And if you add up the money, there was 536,000 imaginary dollars more made in the single tasking version, or there was $500,000 lost in the multitasking version because of the decision not to prioritize based on commercial value. Okay, I just saw a hand go up. I'm about to finish in just one moment, so I'll come back to that in just a sec. So just here, just really quickly, the first step to fixing this is actually realizing that you have a problem. And this is like in the first 2 examples, people are oblivious to this. You go look anywhere, if they've got competing projects and they've got competing resources going across them, they're trying to keep everyone busy and they're trying to show progress every day or every week to their customers. And they are trying very, very, very quickly to start everything as soon as it can. Staggering the starts of projects causes pain because people think their stuff hasn't been worked on. So it's really counterintuitive. And then we have the curse of having knowledge about this and having to try and explain it to other people, which is why I put these slides together many, many years ago. Okay, so the second step is to decide whether it's worth fixing. And now for something like this, if you guys are noticing this stuff around, it's really, really, really useful to just put rough money things on this. Just make up some numbers that seem plausible with someone that cares, just like I did in the second example, and just go roughly, what's this costing us? What's this costing us? And you've already got numbers that you can use. You can use a cost of delay. It's a very rough approximation, but it gets you going. And then just calculate what it costs. And it's hugely, hugely, hugely valuable to reduce the multitasking. Okay, so nearly there. There's just one more thing. You see these guys here, you just saw them before. That's really cool. Now let me just show you something magical. And it was actually a friend of mine that worked at GE in that site. Once I put these slides together and I worked there, I seen it all around GE. And his name was Andrew Ireland. And he come out, and I've been using these slides probably for 5 years at that stage. And he said to me, I want to show you something. And I go, wow. And he goes, what about that? And what about that? And I slapped my forehead because just as I'm saying, all these other people don't notice the blindingly obvious. I, for at least 5 years, had not thought that you could actually do 5 projects in this place at the same time. I'd never thought to put those 2 lines there. So there's probably some meta version of stupidity and wisdom going on at the same time there. But yeah. So there's the last bit. Not only do you make more money from the first 3, you've got room to do 2 more in this contrived, very simplified, fake example, but the principles work. It's you could come up with lots of objections and edge cases to this, but the principles will work. Prioritize projects so that they're done with intensity and focus, not diluted. That requires someone, a throttle neck, I call them. I used to call them a flow master because that was the name I had in rolling rocks downhill. A throttle neck whose job is to make sure that at the smallest level, the right tasks and stuff get get started, the right work gets released into teams at a higher level to make sure that the right projects get started and that they're staggered so that they're not diluted. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is that. Right.
Applause from me. Very nice.
Thank you, Clarke.
Thank you. There's a big shark, Anthony Little, behind you.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know if
Bruce.
you've seen it. Bruce, of course it's Bruce.
Fish are friends, not food. Exactly. So I have a question from your perspective.
Yeah.
How do you see when you have the conversation and there's the obvious commercial benefits for said organization at buying?
Yep.
What's the word? How do we help equip them to have a conversation with their customer who's been told to wait to start, who's probably reporting to an executive who's going, why hasn't they started yet? Okay, let's switch to a different provider.
Yeah, so I'm not going to give you the exact words because like I said before, seriously, I do the Yoda thing and I let other people go do the Luke thing and actually fight the battle. So in fact, I'll show you the book here. There's two books I use. I'll come back to your question in a moment. There's two books that hugely influenced me during my life, and a lot of it now is I teach people how to have hard conversations. So that's one there worth crucial conversations. It's just really, really helpful to have hard conversations. It is amazing. It's absolutely
I had to
life-changing.
reread it twice.
Did you?
Yeah.
I've actually sent probably 9 copies out in the last 6 months to a whole bunch of people. Some executive level, some just doing like senior kind of delivery managers, and at that level, they're just reading it, and just the first chapter just blows their mind, just as it did me. And so anyway, so the reason I'm saying that is I help people have the hard conversations. So you're asking the right thing, and everything is situational. The second book is The Trusted Advisor. Now, I'm not sure if that focuses there, but this is the Trusted Advisor field book. And I must admit, I've sent out copies of this and I recommend it all the time, but I've never actually read it. I happened to work with a company about 20 years ago that specialized in trust and building trust. And I learned a lot from there. And this has just got so much stuff that rather than me trying to teach the stuff that I don't know if I can teach it. I can't teach it nearly as well as that. So there you go. So to go back to your question, how do you equip them? You sit down and you make it as simple as you possibly can, and as easy as you possibly can, with as little change as there could be, to put the stuff in place. And I can't remember who said it before, but whoever said, don't switch if you've got less than 2 or 3 days to go on something. You need things like that. You can go to your customer and say, oh, look, we've scheduled you in. You've got a firm start date, 3 weeks from tomorrow. And they go, oh, it'd be really cool if you could start today. Oh, no, we can't. We're booked solid till then, but we're starting in 3 weeks from today. And they go, oh, okay. And if there's any changes, we'll give you an update. So again, see how that's almost like a little coordination thing as well, a little bit of communication, and people go, oh, okay, they've given me something solid that I think I can. Once you demonstrate that you're trustworthy by keeping your promise over time, that's cool. You can also, when you're doing that, ideally you do what exactly your role models for this kind of stuff should all be Amazon. If they tell you it's going to arrive in 3 weeks but then they continue message say, oh, we've shipped your thing to 5 days early, you don't complain. So you can ring, your person and say, hey, look, things worked out well. We're actually a bit of a head start. Would you like us to start early? Yes. And so in that stuff, it's all about actually having nice conversations with them. That's the first bit. The second bit that's really, really important. Notice how in all of these things I've given, I've put dollars and stuff around them. Forget about the dollars. Think about it as being the benefits, and I happen to quantify them. So if you're doing work for people and it's valuable, then they will want you to start, but they'll also really want you to do a good job. And they'll want to have nice grown-out conversations with you and to be involved and to collaborate and even to synergize with you. So when you start this kind of stuff, you don't want to treat it like a transactional thing. You actually want to have nice grown-up conversations with them about when you start and why you're going to start then. And if there's anything you can, and understand their concerns, and it's all about having trusted adult sort of conversations. And those delightfully are skills that can actually be learned. And they get easier to learn, I find, as you get older. Hence my name, Jurassic Clarke.
Thank you, Jurassic Clarke. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Are there any more questions, or just unloading your brain about what you've heard? It was a really excellent talk, I found. Ravi?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions that were earlier, and I've seen what you're talking about in larger things. There was one company I was working with, I think had 10 simultaneous projects, all of which were like 80% done. And none delivered. So one of the questions was, the company that you were working for, I guess was GE, were they delivering things late before you started this?
Actually, I'm not sure if this is recorded. You know, of
Well,
course
okay.
not. Yes, they were. Yeah. So just in this side, but they were no different to anywhere else in the world, right? So they were the same, and they were really, really shit hot. The stuff they built, but they had before I got there. They had you remember when Windows 95 came out in 98 or something like that? I don't know. There were just how things were done. You know, they released software out to people, and they promised 1 year. They were promising a year. They should have been promising a decade, kind of thing. But it was usually, and then they put out something and it had been really late. And then when they switched across to do the agile stuff, it really, really helped them. But they threw a lot of the baby out with the bathwater. And so I came in, and there were others there as well, but we that site, no one knew it at the time, but it was going to be closed down, and they actually bought a competitor, and no one knew at the time. It's public knowledge afterwards, but it wasn't performing well, and so they got some newbies in. And my job was to rescue their agile implementation, and there were a few others there that were new, and it was to basically say, look, just try and rescue it. And the lovely thing is that there was a whole lot of clever stuff done, but getting the fundamental bits of agile in place, with my TOC kind of angle on it, got it going really well. It did amazing things. It just totally turned around that company, and it's about maybe 6 months into that job. GE used to fly everyone to, we went to, I can't remember where it was Cincinnati, I think, and that everyone fly, and they go in there, and the guy who went on to be head of software development within GE popped our site up, which was built on like really old, ugly code, you know, just the nature of his old stuff. He put up statistics about our site and said, hey, look, this is the best agile site in all of GE. And all we did was just really the fundamentals of it. And we just got it working really, really well. And then there were a whole bunch of things that we did after that, that were built on getting the fundamentals. And so like getting rid of the multitasking and getting, you know, the throttle neck in place, and then teaching them how to break almost all of the less important rules of Scrum, so that it actually worked with the way they built code, and so on, got them to a point where they could suddenly release stuff of very good quality, and they released every 3 months. But this was the nature of the stuff. Every 3 months was huge. And I'll just tell you what difference this made to the customers and why it made such a difference. I mentioned that I accidentally made a sale. and I genuinely didn't make the difference that made the sale, but there were these people coming, they were German and Italian, which is quite good because I can see we're represented here on the screen. There were power companies and they come over and they were looking at our product and some other products that were similar, and they were going to buy one, and their taxis got delayed. So they chucked me at them to explain what, as they were leaving to go to the airport. And so they chucked me at them and said, could you just explain while these guys have time, how your development process works? And I just described a simple agile process that released every 3 months. It had really high quality, that if they had any problems, within 3 months, they would get a brand new update. And it feels so archaic compared to, what it could have been, in a lot of places. This was such a transformation from every 3 years they get a release. They went away and they decided to buy our product because of the development process. It just solves so many problems for them. Sorry,
Great,
I'm just
thanks.
reliving it. I'm just going back. Those were the days.
There is Darren who's raising his hand as well.
Yeah, just Clarke, back to the silo,
Silo, synchronize, synergize.
Thank you. That's the one. What's your thoughts, about global teams in absolutely opposite time zones? I've got my thoughts on it and what we do here, but I was just thinking how you would unravel that.
Great question.
Okay. So now I have to confess that I thankfully don't have to deal with that myself, but I deal with people who do. Okay,
Yep.
So when I'm yodering,
Yep.
some of the groups do that. And so I have these lovely opinions, which is very easy for me to have, but they have to go do all the hard work. Okay, so actually, no, this is a stupid way to answer. I'll give you an example when I did actually have to do this, and it was, I'm not sure, it was 2008, 2007, 8, something like that. I'm not sure, but I was working with Dell, and this was in Glasgow, and Dell had a team of developers in Glasgow. They had a team of testers in India, and they had a team of product owners in Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not sure if this is politically correct, but it was kind of like being stuck between the Cowboys and the Indians. Probably safe to say. Yep. So there was the Texas, Glasgow, India, and they're all in different places. So if you think about the most important thing that they had to do in their whole day, so to just go, what's the constraint? What's the one thing that they had to do? And it was kind of like, well, there's no way India and Texas could talk to each other. It just wasn't going to work. So that meant that Glasgow was the middleman. But there was maybe an hour and a half of working day overlap between the Indian
Sort of
side,
both sides.
both sides, and it was kind of like you're going, what's the most precious? So if you think of a bottleneck, right? It's the most precious resource. If you go, what's the most precious thing in our environment for our productivity? And it was making sure that hour and a half, that they milked that time for absolutely every ounce of goodness that they possibly could. So that means that when they were going into the meeting, so the end of the day for the Glasgow team, they've prepped whatever they need to do, and they've put a lot of work into it, so that when they have the conversations with the Indian team, they've played catch up from the day before. They come in and they can look at stuff, and they make sure that they get that overlap window, and that little window it was where the coordination had to happen, and the synergy happened. So it's a funny, again, it's kind of funny because they've been going on 3-4 years, that team working that way, and it just sort of been kind of, it was really hard, clever guys, clever team, but they'd never kind of seen that little window was like
the opportunity.
Yeah. So maybe that would help. Otherwise, I don't really have any informed. I have loads of opinions, but none other than that are actually informed.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry. Any more questions? Nice, nice, nice. And we are,
Doesn't look like it.
yeah. Sorry.
Doesn't look like there's any more questions.
Nice, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Clarke, and also that you take so much attention on what's behind people. I'm sure nobody would have realized about men and sharks. I think they were just
All the
focused on
strange men that are wandering in and out of your kitchen.
yeah, and the shark behind Anthony. I think you know, it reminds me of this, do you know this video when the gorilla goes in the back and nobody realized? A bit like that. Yeah.
So my favorite joke about the shark is sometimes you're working from home, it's easy to forget you work from a large corporate, so you need to see a predator sneaking up behind you.
That's so true. He looks friendly.
Yeah. This is actually a picture of Deep Blue, the largest great white shark ever on film.
Ah, it's a beautiful picture. Oh, apart from the bit right at the front, which is blocking. The
Yeah,
beautiful bit.
she's amazing, this one. So and there's lots of footage of her swimming with a couple of really famous divers. So yeah.
That's really neat. Cool.
Nice. So there isn't any more questions. I will stop the recording. Thank you so much, Clarke. And to go back to what we said before, don't forget the first Kanban conference in Australia, the first one on our side of the planet on the 9th October. And thank you, Clarke, for joining us today with this excellent talk. I will stop the recording now. Those who like to hang out, feel free to do so.